Welcome to another edition of Power Tips. Today we are going to talk about sales forecasts, which are in the Sales Hub. Malcolm, why don't you give us a quick little tour of sales forecasts?
I would love to. Yeah, this kind of came up because it's an area in conversation I find people are not using. They're seems almost like they're afraid of them, which I get because it is rather complex. But uh, it seems complex. It's actually not. So what I thought we'd do is take this power tip session to just kind of dive into here's what it looks like when you're working through setting one up. This is not a training. We're not going to go over the click by click sequence, but here we'll walk you through the sort of the generic screen, and then we can look at what it looks like when you actually have one stood up and how to use it and the quotas and all that, and because they're really quite powerful. So what we've got here, I've gone into the Sales Hub and into the area change here and go into app settings. And within app settings in the performance management section, we've got all old school goals stuff, which is still around and will be probably for the foreseeable future, but we now have forecast. And so it's buried into this section. And this is kind of the start of the process. Now, this one's already been stood up. So we're looking at one that's already been created because it's already filled in. And I want to kind of go over a couple of key things. But essentially what you're doing is just saying, like, what kind of forecast do you want? And to my knowledge, as far as I've played around with this, set it up a couple of times, it doesn't have to be in the context of revenue and opportunities. It can be other things as well. But I think the more common place for it to come up would be this. So all the documentation kind of walks you through this, but really the documentation, Heidi, you commented, right? You opened up the documentation and it was a lot.
It
You
was
said,
slightly overwhelming. It's very long. It has a lot of steps, a lot of words.
yeah, there's a lot to it. So I found, because I did the same thing and I started to look through it and I was like, this is wild. Like there's just so many steps. I'm just going to go in and just poke through and see if I can get one from start to finish. And so it is overwhelming because you start on here and you got to get all the way over here. But it's really not that bad. So if you haven't looked at this because you're like, oh, it just seems too complicated, take a half an hour and go ahead and try and set one up. And it doesn't take that long to do it end to end. And then you'll have a forecast stood up. But you're basically saying, okay, let's use this table and these related, hierarchy structure. So in this context, we're saying, I want to see all of our opportunities by users, and it factors in user managers and things like that. So you'll see when we get to the forecast screen, it all factors in. One thing I'm not really clear about is this format, and I think this is new just relatively recently because um, I don't know what a 3334 or a 3343 means because I'm not
You
a
don't know that?
sales.
Everybody
No,
knows that,
I
Jason.
mean, I can make it up. That's how I dance, but I really have no idea. So I don't know if you guys know for real. Like, do you know what the sales cycles like this
It's
mean? Is that
got
what it is?
Gregorian in there. Is that like a type of calendar?
Yeah.
I don't know. This is
Uh,
interesting.
yeah,
No, I'm
so it's
not too
interesting
sure.
and it's required, yet I'm able to move past it. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, and you also have periods for this forecast there, which is interesting. So it means, or I guess I would assume that means it doesn't have to follow the uh, organization periods, right? So when we're working with goals, if I remember correctly, you have to set up your organizational, like when your fiscal calendar,
Right,
right?
right.
And then the goal lines up with that. But it's interesting if I can configure separate periods
Yeah,
here.
I found it. I'm stealing. You
Yeah.
can take it back in a
No, you're
moment.
good. There's a learn more button right there. So, yeah.
Boom. 13 months of 4 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, that's complicated.
Oh yeah,
And to
so
your point,
instead of using months or quarters, we're using weeks.
Yes.
Interesting.
Now, this is a great example of, yes, there is a ton of documentation. It is overwhelming, but gosh, it's good to have here. Look how easy that is to find right here in all this forecasting, which is all of this. All right.
so there's
Apologies,
lots there.
Malcolm.
No, you're good. I'm glad you
Steal
pulled that
back.
up. I
While
was
you're
just,
sharing that, I think we should probably mention the licensing stuff for this because this is not included with
yes.
your base sales license, correct? This is premium and enterprise.
Well, so the prediction, yeah, that's right. Premium and enterprise is my understanding. It's not with your basic one. But there's a prediction model as well, which we'll touch on in a couple minutes. But there's actually a predictive element to it that is the premium or requires the I'm not familiar with. I know they've changed some things. It used to be like Sales Insights something. There was an extra add-on that you needed,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you needed for the prediction stuff. So the basic stuff is available. If you have Sales Enterprise, you can spin up a forecast. And if you work your way through all of this, it just each section contains different information. Who can access it? Is it restricted by security role? What's the layout look like when you get to the actual forecast? So you've got lots of capabilities. The last thing is actually giving you a template that you download, and then you can fill it in immediately. And that template is setting your quotas for the overarching team as well as each individual member on the team. So the way I've got it set up is we have 3 users. One user is the manager of these 2 users. And so you'll see the hierarchy structure when I go to the actual forecast. So if I navigate back to sales and I scroll down a little bit,
That
we've
hierarchy
got,
seems a lot easier than old school goals.
yeah, I agree, because they were complex. And so this gives us now the error message you're seeing is because I don't have a premium license in here. So it's trying to do the prediction and it's saying I can't because you don't have the requirements met. So that's not a surprise. But the basic stuff's working just fine. So you can see we've got our people. This is the leader. They have their own quota, and then the other staff have quotas as well. And what I love about this, once you've stood this up, so again, take a half an hour, in 15 or so minutes, you'll have your entire structure set up. Just go with the basics and don't worry about changing a bunch of crazy stuff. Just set it up as it gives you the data. And then you've got your forecast stood up. And then you set your quotas and you import your quotas and they're available immediately. And so now if I click on Veronica, it gives us a little Kanban look. You can also show it as a table if you want. And it shows all the opportunities that are included in this forecast. And if you're looking at this version, you can actually quickly just say, oh yeah, I'm going to move that to best case. And it looked like it swapped. It didn't. It's pulling records from below up. So if I move this one over, so now, and watch up here, this data changes as you make those changes on the board, which is super handy. So this has given us our breakdown of like, here's your quota, here's what you've won so far, here's what your best case, your committed and your pipeline are, and then your forecast, which is your forecast. Hey, you've got this person has 190% of the volume they need to satisfy their quota. This person only has 55%, right?
Yeah.
Let's take some of this person's opportunities and give them to Veronica so that pipeline's bigger and they can fulfill that. I'm sure that salespeople are having a fit because I said that, because they're like, don't take
I
my
was
work.
gonna say,
I want that.
Be
Yeah.
pissed about that.
Yeah, but that's the concept, right? Is what's here. So I don't know if you guys have played around with this at all, but in my conversations at Summit, I ran into multiple people where this came up and they were like, oh yeah, we don't do that. Like it's complicated, too complicated. And it is, but it's pretty functional.
Yeah,
I definitely
haven't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kylie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I haven't played with it because I was scared of it, or I thought it was the same as goals, or the same as the one on opportunities deal manager. I don't think I really understood all the functionality we have here, because I think it seems like it's going to be a more advanced goals and something that we could use to move away from where we had been using goals in the past. And the thing that I think's interesting, right, is this is going to reoccur. So I've set up my quota per quarter, right? And next quarter, it'll just restart and automatically keep working, which if you remember when we used to do goals and then they'd say, okay, well, what do we do next month? And then you'd have to recreate or re-import all of those goals. And it really kind of made them so nobody wanted to use them, even though they wanted to see the pretty little charts. But I think if we can use this instead, that would be really exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. You bring up an interesting point too about deal manager. Just wouldn't this be cool on a dashboard if you have your forecast and your deal manager like right in the same spot?
All in one. Yeah.
You could do all of your work as a manager right from there.
Well, that manager comment's a good one because you, Heidi, I think it was you that said, while we were kind of doing some reading on this, there was an interesting note about you shouldn't use this. I'm not going to steal the words. I forget. Right? When should you and shouldn't you use this?
Yeah. There's a really nice call out in the documentation in an important box, because I think the whole idea of, wow, this is easy chair manager. I'm just going to look at this forecast and let's fire Alan. He's useless. Let's give Allie a raise. So there's a nice little thing here saying this is intended to help managers or supervisors enhance your team's performance. It is not intended for use in making and should not be used to make decisions that affect employment of an individual. Just true. I mean, it's just estimates, right? This isn't actual revenue. This is CRM. This is what we think we're going to win. Maybe it's better to tie your compensation, your commission, make salary and hiring decisions based on the actual numbers that come in. So never forget, CRM is our estimates.
Well, and when you fill these in, so if I open one of these, I can open it up, nice little inline editor, or not inline, whatever they call these, shadow box form dialog. And so I can edit, make changes. I can win this from here, put in the revenue and everything. Those are the reals. So that real revenue is going to get factored into the one column. But to your point, this could be off. It's just an opportunity. We're just guessing what we think we can make on here. And so that's worth calling out. The other thing I want to point out, two more quick things, and then we'll wrap up. Recalculate data. So I just clicked it in real time. It's going to do its thing. It's churning, basically allowing you, manager or user, to look at this and click that refresh button. It's going to pull and query the system, grab all the relevant data, and pull it in. It doesn't take too long, and you'll see this will turn blue in a minute. While that's doing that, the other thing I want to call out is what's not working because I don't have the right license set up, this prediction model. This is pretty neat. So what it's going to do is after you've been using it for a while, and it being CRM, your closing opportunities, it's going to actually keep track of and monitor that and predict based on your past performance. So if I traditionally get 20 opportunities a month and I close 10 of them, it's going to say, okay, you're 50%, right? You got a 50% win rate. That's great. You don't have enough in your pipeline to satisfy your quota, right? That's what's happening right here. Veronica has a quota of 10,000. Well, she only has 5,500 in her pipeline at the committed stage. She's not there. She doesn't have enough. If we were to move things over from best case to committed, then that's going to change. So it's basically helping people realize I got to move the needle on these and get them to a place where they're in a better position to win. Otherwise, I couldn't possibly hit my quota because I don't have enough volume.
I am curious how the sales co-pilot's going to come into play with this in the future. Obviously, it's not in forecast yet, but it's got to be coming,
So
right?
funny,
Especially with.
So I had done this sample yesterday, and I said, how likely is it Allie will win all her opportunities this month? And it does a little query. Yesterday it said 80%, and I wasn't clear on where she got that, or it got that. I don't know why Copilot is a she. I don't know why I made that assumption. She being Allie, that's what I equated it to. Now it's 50%, which is interesting because I changed the data a little bit. And so I wonder where that's pulling from, right? Where does that say that's a probability? But that is interesting to me that it can come up right here. And I wonder if it's based on this data or based on other data. And I don't know the answer to that.
That's interesting. I guess I was thinking more on the admin side, right? That cumbersome setup of 9 steps. It reminds me of Dynamics for marketing and the annoying cumbersome steps to authenticate your domain and set it up in the first time. And then woof, Copilot made that like 5 seconds.
A snap.
Feels like this is a good spot for that. Copilot engineers, this is a good spot for that.
Yeah, that's what we've been seeing everywhere else. So it makes sense to see it here too. And Malcolm, question on security. So I can control this by security role. So I could make it so only managers could see the forecast, for example. Could I also make it so my user they could only see their forecast and not other forecasts?
That is a fabulous question that I don't have a full answer to. I'm not sure if you can restrict. I know that we can restrict who can see it, and it says make adjustments. So I'm assuming that gives you some capability in there. But to my knowledge, there isn't a line item in the security matrix that pertains to forecasts. It's get a role here. Now, don't quote me on that. I absolutely could be wrong. There could be a line item because those matrices are massive. But that I would assume that's where that would exist, saying, yeah, you can read, but you can't write. Yeah. It would be standard. I just don't know if it belongs or if it has a home in there.
Right. That little note there says security field users can see the data that belongs directly to them or their descendants and can make adjustments. So I think we'd have to play with it because that might answer the question. I think what you hear sometimes asking from salespeople or managers of salespeople is they want them to see other people's forecasts, right? Because they want that competition, but they also don't necessarily want them to know who it is, right? They
Right.
want to know their third, but they don't want to know who's in first. So I think that's something that would be interesting to play with or see if there's options, further
Mhm.
as we customize this,
This
or
is
how we
this is
can
interesting too,
pull this
right?
into other things.
So you can share it, and you can give people read access, or they can read and
Mm.
adjust, which is
I
interesting.
hate sharing.
Interesting.
So yeah, yeah.
But is
So
this
lots of
regular
cool stuff.
sharing? It's a different sharing, right?
It is. This might be acceptable sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're sharing.
Anyways, thanks everyone for joining us for today's Power Tips. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick overview and discussion about sales forecasts, and we hope that you will check them out. Let us know down in the comments if you're already using sales forecasts, or if you have any questions, or how you think that you can use this in your organization. Thanks so much.